the date for hiring the modeler that was approved in the 23 budget, excuse me, from January to September. Because we filled the modeler position that was also approved in that budget with an internal staff member, that created a vacancy that the planners are currently recruiting for, so we would just like to use that same recruitment to fill too. We're not asking for money because we have enough salary lapse to handle it, but we do need that date changed, otherwise the auditors will cut my ears. With that, there's any questions?
Questions?
I move with the suggested motion.
Second that. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. To recommended changes in policy 29, Mr. Long.
Thank you. I suspect that most, if not all of you, have seen this. This is the result of the 22 General Assembly session. We did not do a change tracking on the policy document because we also did a lot of work to clarify the document that just turned out with all the color coding and formatting and turned into a bowl of spaghetti. The policy amendment does the main thing, which is to allow the authority and its committees to have 2 remote, all virtual meetings a year outside of a declared state of emergency. The rest of the changes were for clarity. There's anything else?
My only question, and so this might be a question for the attorneys. So the general, there will be a bill in the General Assembly to allow advisory committees and commissions and boards, 2 bodies, to have unlimited virtual meetings. How would that impact the subcommittees of the authority to just track with what is happening at municipal levels? Or do we do something different? Or do they need to put it in the General Assembly and law that says that for regional meetings it's different? What happens with that? How's that work?
Technically, what they have been doing is indicating what regional boards, what's happening with regional boards also there. So it would probably something to be clear about when. If they don't, then I think it would just be the same, it would be whether the regional body is the advisory body decisions. Same.
Sure. Because these developments in detail language example in which maybe look at this thing now in 37, which explicitly does say that the governing body is supporting the subcommittees or others.
Exactly. That was
so that's in this language now. And
okay.
Considering later.
So we would not have to go back and change that language if the General Assembly adopted something different, because it would track anyway.
Tracks what's there now.
Okay.
If they change, yes. Something that Tracy and others.
Gotcha. All right. Understand. Thank you.
That comes through in the next general. Yeah. That's true. Right. But we'll have a little time.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I would just note, Mayor Rochelle, that the budget item that was just acted on will go to the authority tonight. This policy will be to the authority in October.
Sorry.
This policy will be to the authority in October. The budget item that was an earlier action item will go to the authority tonight.
So moved. Second?
Second.
Favor? Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you. To team activity.
Thank you. It has been a while since the Finance Committee met, and we've got the update for the monthly reports, but I'm going to spend most of the time, limited time I have tonight, to talk from this sheet. The first thing I want to do is introduce across the room Adnan Malik, who has recently joined us from the private sector, working for an international technology firm as a senior accountant. And Margaret has, whom you've seen, I think, in pretty much every role but Keith, Monica, and I's, in some form or fashion over the years, is taking the accounting technician position. And she never smiled so broadly as when she made that transition. I just
Welcome.
want to give you those two.
And congratulations, well, welcome again.
Right.
On some other news, there's a table on this presentation that shows that we reimbursed $57 million in fiscal 22 for project reimbursements. Unfortunately, that is the lowest we've done since we picked up speed. It is less than half of what we did in fiscal 21 and a little more than a third of what we did in fiscal 2020. While we were examining these numbers, the auditors obviously asked us a whole bunch of process questions because they have to do some due diligence to make sure that the authority isn't the one that's caused this disruption in what was a building routine. It wasn't the authority. It wasn't the authority staff. I mean, the authority itself is doing its jobs. You're putting money on projects. The projects, obviously, some of them have project delays, but we are also experiencing, and we had to discuss with the auditors because it came in while they were physically in the office doing field work, and we have a responsibility to disclose certain things while they're doing the field work. We actually had a project reimbursement come in, and I'm not going to identify the project or the jurisdiction, that had invoices going back to 2017. It was a relatively small reimbursement at $1.6 million, but 72 invoices in a packet, with some of them going back to 2017, poses a risk for us. We do have the duplicate reimbursement request that we'll talk about a little bit later, that we've done to kind of bolster our internal controls, although the onus is on the project sponsors to have controls to not submit duplicate reimbursement requests. So to that end, what I would like for the committee to consider is that we come back to you with a proposed policy amendment. It would be another amendment to policy 29 that would say if an invoice is older than 18 months, unless the project sponsor can document some sort of extraordinary circumstances, it won't be paid.
18 months.
18 months, which is effectively 2 fiscal closes. So that invoice would have gone through 2 of their audits.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think looking at these numbers, that's a big concern. Because if funding is not being reimbursed for projects in the region, that means the portfolio is growing, and that means likewise the potential for tampering with NBPA funding in Richmond increases. So that's a concern.
And to your point, Mayor, unless something changes, I expect the portfolio will probably exceed 1.5 billion by the end of this calendar year, which is also the start of the journey.
Madam
Yes,
Chair, so yes, a invoice is going back to 2017 is, that's almost unexplainable. My concern is going forward. I don't think it's going to be that unusual to have invoices that are 18 months, even though that's 2 fiscal years, because right now, the ability to not just get materials, but to get workers is far outpacing, the positions the work we have. And we're having to, and as are many counties, go into contingency funds and find out we have to go into amendments to our contracts that are much, much higher than they have been before, just because of the cost overrides and increase. So I guess I don't mind the 18 months, but I have a feeling we're going to be getting that justification pretty often. And I have a feeling that's probably going to be the justification. So I mean, you're right, whether it's 18 months or 24 months, either way, it's still 2 fiscal cycles. That 24 months wouldn't change that. But I am saying that I do believe you're gonna be seeing that, well, now the 2017, that there's no reason for that, that's a different issue.
Well,
But I think you're gonna be seeing that more often, actually.
If I may, Chair Randall, if a supply delivery is late, it's not invoiced.
Well, but again, it's not, literally the workers to do the job is what we are fostering.
Yeah, this is not prescriptive timing, cash flow type of a standard. This is the date of the invoice.
Yeah,
So
no,
if
yeah.
the people work, they're typically charged the next 30 days. I suspect the project sponsors are not waiting 18 months to pay those invoices.
I don't know.
They're just, he's saying that the sponsors, yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
But I think there
There-
is,
No, I don't have any issue with your suggestion. I just think you're probably gonna see this more often than we think we are.
Well, and certainly if there's a contract dispute or something like that, those are always very well documented and, you know.
What you're basically asking for is the reason.
and I think to Chair Randall's point is to more of the reason why monies aren't moving, why we're not being invoiced
Right,
as much as we would like to be.
right.
And that is a different issue. And, you know, we hope to come up with some initiatives to try to address that side of the equation as well. That don't involve policy.
No, I think that's exactly the issue. I think money's not, I think money's not moving for that very reason. But I'm also not going to do anything that risk us, like the risk our credit rating, to risk our good standing. You know, because these issues may go on for a while. So I do think that, you know, 18, all I'm saying is I think we're going to find that this is going to happen more than we want it to. And localities are going to be explaining and they may have valid explanations, but I think you're going to see them having to explain.
Well, I appreciate your comments that there is a wider context that we do have to take a look at this in, yeah.
I would add that we would look at putting like a 6-month delayed implementation on the policy change. So we will go to the RJAC and work through this for probably 2 or 3 months. And then bring it back to the committee and suggest that the policy, while it become adopted when the committee makes a recommendation and the authority adopts, but we would still then have 6 months to allow project sponsors to catch up any invoices
Oh,
that they
okay.
have sitting around.
6 months?
Well, it'll actually end up being closer to 9 or 10 months because,
Yeah, I think that's too long.
well, but we do want to coach them to submit the invoices. If we start this process now, that 6-month period hopefully will be before the end of this fiscal year. And we won't be in this situation again.
Madam- No, Madam Chair, yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Truthfully, the reason I think it's too long is because localities who are involved in the authority are not new to this. This is not new for them. This is not new for no one. This is not new. And so you're right, 6 months is going to be more like 9 or 10 months. And I think that's too long of a runway. And I would actually move that to 3, to be honest. And even that would
Accept
be,
that.
I would move to 3, and even that would be 6. In reality, that would be 6.
Because I think what we want to incentivize is, you know, we pay within 20 days. That's what the SPA says. But I think oftentimes the project sponsors, they're paying. And by the time we get the invoices to reimburse the project sponsors, there's a significant delay.
Mhm.
And we want to try to cut that down
Yeah.
because you're right here, Randall, between our revenue projections and how we're looking regarding the portfolio, people will see all of this money without paying attention to the funds being assigned or programmed for
Absolutely.
projects.
Absolutely.
If I may, a key part of the reimbursement process is every reimbursement package has a project update with it. So a project update that stretches from 21 to 2017, it's very difficult for the planning staff or
Sure.
finance staff. to
Yeah.
analyze.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have a question. Is it safe for us to assume that this issue could cause the MBTA to have a negative comment on the audit?
There's levels of comments. It would be a management comment, which is the least significant of them, but we do have a track record of not having had it.
We don't.
Actually, we had one comment when we first started up, and that is we were using Excel instead of having a general ledger system, but that was because we didn't have time to actually install a general ledger system yet.
Any other questions or comments of any type? Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
Well, that's verbal guidance.
Oh, I see, it's not.
So
a-
we say
action
three to
item.
six.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Okay,
Madam Chair, is the verbal guidance 3 or 6? Or does that need to be,
I beg your pardon.
is the verbal guidance 3 months or 6 months? Are we giving the verbal guidance to staff for 3 months? Or
What
6?
was the consensus?
I believe it should be 3.
Three's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get these invoices paid.
Sorry.
On a related, I do have some, this, I apologize, this gets very inside baseball accountancy. Not something kind to do to you before you have a long authority meeting with a public hearing. But I did want to let you know that we had to implement GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board, number 87, which deals with capitalization of leases. And I just wanted to give a notice, there is a monthly operating budget report in this packet that is the final report for fiscal 22. Because of this accounting board standard, the way it is currently prescribed, it looks like we overspent the operating budget by $300,000. If you turn to the very last page of your packet, you'll, about midway down, you'll see a negative 300,000. When in actuality, we closed the fiscal year $365,000 underspent. What many jurisdictions are doing, as we understand it from the auditors, is they are putting budget numbers in to make kind of an adjustment on that. I do not want to do that because the public, yourselves, can look at the operating budget you approve, can look at the regional revenue fund and see the funds coming from the regional revenue fund to the operating budget, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have any non-cash items going through the budget. Peggy is working very diligently. Our initial conversations with the audit firm is we're working on a way that we can change the format and still comply. Obviously, we have to comply with the GASB 87 standard. But we're working through that. I just wanted to let you know that that's an ongoing discussion with the auditors, and we think we'll clean that up. The next item is likewise, when we do our audit as of June 30th, the investment portfolio is required to be valued as though we sold the entire portfolio on June 30th. Something we have not done, something we will probably never do. But because the portfolio had securities in it that were purchased when a good rate of return was 30 or 40 basis points. And in June 30th of this year, you could buy those same securities or same type of securities and earn 3%. What it did is create an unrealized loss on our financial statements. The unrealized loss, if you remember, in prior years, we've had unrealized gains. And I've said, don't get attracted to that money. It's not real. You can't spend it. An unrealized loss is basically just on the value of the portfolio. It's a significant number coming up this year. Without the final audit completed, it's about $33 million. It disguises the fact that we made $6.5 million on real portfolio return, interest that got booked, as revenue. Our budget for that revenue line was 5.2 million. So we exceeded our budget in our actual earnings, but because of the auditing standards, we are required to put the value of the portfolio change as though we sold the portfolio as of June 30th. What we are doing, again, with the auditors is the typical financial statement would just say investment return, negative 33 million. And I think we've pretty much got this one locked in. Peggy's working again with the audit firm. We're going to show all of the makeup of that line so that you, the public, interested parties that read the financial statements, the insomniacs of the world, will be able to see that the portfolio actually made 6.5 million. It had this unrealized valuation change that we have to book that created a net actually 26.5 million.
Okay, that was my question. Okay, you just answered my question.
So it looks like a loss, and my fear is a common reader of the financial statements, somebody who's not used to looking at this. And oh, by the way, I think every jurisdiction is struggling with the same issue. Every jurisdiction has an investment portfolio. So I just wanted to make you aware of those items.
Madam Chair, so it looks like a loss of 33, but it was a net of 26.
A net loss of 26. But the actual earnings on the portfolio were 6.5. That's the interest that we banked, if you will.
But only a paper loss, not
The paper
an
loss.
actual.
Just like when we had gains on the portfolio, unrealized gains, the key word is unrealized. Just like when we had unrealized gains, I advised the committee, we can't get attached to that money. It's not real. You can't spend it. It's not revenue. And at that time, I advised the committee, the real revenue from the portfolio, I can't remember what it was at the time, but it was something less.
Bless you.
Questions?
No, it's God bless you, because, wow.
So I think that the transparency.
Councilmembers?
Yeah, so let me try to understand this, because what is the 26 million you just mentioned? Is that a loss? Is that an actual loss?
It's not an actual loss.
Okay,
It would have only occurred, the accountants want to
Okay.
compare our balance sheet with corporations.
right. Got it. So you said originally the unrealized loss was 33 million.
Subtract the actual income that we did make,
Okay.
the true income, and we get net.
26 million unrealized loss. That's what I wanted to establish. That's an unrealized loss.
Yes.
I guess the question is, where are we today?
The portfolio is somewhat underperforming our benchmarks. We go into it in the monthly portfolio report, but I think that we will be exceeding our benchmarks, if not by the end of the calendar year, by January, February. We are well on track to make our budget estimate for revenue in the portfolio actually exceeded for the year.
And my suggestion would be, if we can, on sensitive issues like this, that we drop a footnote, if possible, explaining what you just said, or as well for that, or was it the 300,000?
But we're hoping the 300,000 will fix with changing the format. This, every audit has management comments in it, and we always make a comment, whether it's a positive, unrealized gain or an unrealized loss, we always address it. It's a good.
Thank you.
Follow up? Mayor Wood, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Long. Shall we move on?
The next item on the list is ESG and Green Bonds. Councilmember Snyder had asked us to take a look at it. He used very careful wording. It was a curiosity. we reconvened what we call the Regional Investment Group. This is something that we had done, the authority had, staff had done prior to COVID, where we got the portfolio managers, whether they were staff managers or elected treasurers from around the region. We get together, have a nice conversation. There's no brokers around, so we talk about what strategies are working, what strategies are not working, what brokers are giving good deals, which ones are less productive for us. So it's just it's a nice forum. We reconvened that specifically to discuss ESG and green bonds, and we basically all had the same kind of opinion, which is it's kind of a Wild West show out there right now. There's very few definitions for ESG and green bonds. There's a lot of I'll say turmoil around the topic. Some of the jurisdictions have a couple of initiatives that we as a group, the regional group, will discuss a little further. I think there's some opportunities in there to investigate those initiatives a little bit more, and we'll just keep you posted on it.
Thanks for
I've noticed that things are not always what they appear to be in the green market. For example, the lithium and cobalt issue that goes into the electric batteries. That's the mining and the actual refinement of those elements is very destructive to the environment.
It's a very complicated issue, and there's very little regulatory guidance on it.
We all want to be green, but we have to engage our critical thinking skills when we discuss the topic. Okay, well, it looks like we have proceeded beautifully. I want to thank staff for all your hard work. Thank you very much. Is there any other business to come before the committee?
I didn't have the back page.
Oh, did I miss something?
Yeah, just an update on the fiscal 24 budget preparation. We are not looking to propose any additional staff positions, but we do have the website consolidation and modernization, kind of the second tranche of that funding will be part of it. The duplicate reimbursement audit, we may have to actually increase the budget amount for that because we based it on volume that we were seeing in fiscal 22, which we didn't realize at the time was the lowest volume year we had of record. But we'll cross that as we get to it. You're going to be receiving a presentation tonight on a regional bus rapid transit. There is a percolating budget request to do a regional study. I think Keith would prefer I not use the word study, but I hadn't practiced. But there'll be more on that. This is just to give you an idea of the budget items we are looking at. Finally, I will wrap up and let you know some other things that we are doing. We are growing up. Jonathan Davis is implementing a record retention policy for us. We're at that point where we've actually got to make some of these things happen because we just can't let the records pile up in the file drawers anymore. We're coming up to our 10-year anniversary of 2013, and it has generated some records.
Wow, that's next year.
We are doing an internal study for the compensation on our planning positions because we've been experiencing some difficulty recruiting in that area. One of the things is I can define an accounting position pretty darn easily. It's much more difficult to define any planning position. It's especially more difficult to define a planning position that isn't just a locality position, but its basic work is regional. Peggy is implementing a fixed asset accounting tracking system. Again, we're getting of that size and age where you'll start to see barcodes on our equipment. That type of internal controls that are probably already standard in other jurisdictions. And finally, I'll note we are Deb, who couldn't be with us tonight, is working on what is called portfolio repositioning. What this entails is we have securities that we bought 6 months, a year ago, that were bought when a good rate of return was 30 basis points, or 0.3 of 1%. We can now, today, actually, we obtained some securities that were paying 4.2%. So we will look to sell some of those lower performing securities. We will incur a loss on those. However, we would only sell them if we can take that same money, reinvest it at a rate of return that not only covers that loss, but also gives a greater rate of return than if we had allowed that security that was sold to stay in the portfolio to maturity. And I mean, it will be a two-step thing.
Right.
And we will, as typical standards are, we will document the analysis and we will document the actual transaction. So that if anybody were to ask, why did you sell the security at a loss? We will explain that be able to explain that we did it because we were going to increase an overall gain.
Comments or questions? Councilmember Snyder? Thank you, Mr. Longy, and my apologies for cutting you off. Is there any other business to come before the committee? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Longy, in the full authority meeting, I can or you can note that we changed that from 3 to 6 months. I don't care which one of us do. I mean, I'm sorry, from 6 to 3 months.
Well, we won't be.
Oh, that's the next, okay, you did say that.
That'll be a couple months.
Yeah. And that was just guidance anyway. Yeah. Yeah.